Hey guys, welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. My name is Brian.
And my name is Maggie.
And we interview Asian entrepreneurs around the world to amplify their voices and empower Asians to pursue their dreams and goals.
We believe that each person has a message and a unique story from their entrepreneurial journey that they can share with all of us. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Shannon Kalayanamitr. Brings over 20 years of experience in entrepreneurship, building and scaling large businesses from establishment to exit, technology and startups, and investments, finance and banking, M&A, and venture capital. She is an American-born Southeast Asian rooted with deep networks in government, business, and technologies. She is currently CEO and founder of 5G Catalyst Technologies Co. Limited, an end-to-end 5G technology and solutions provider. She is also currently advisor and partner at Gobi Partners, a Pan-Asian venture capital. Shannon is passionate, equality, and a women advocator, often seen moderating or speaking on topics on women and gender equality with the UN Women. She's also a notable speaker on topics of technology and business in Southeast Asia and is advising the various Thai government agencies and the Eastern Economic Corridor on its digital transformation strategy. Shannon has a BBA in finance and minor in marketing from Thammasat University, Bangkok, Thailand. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Wow. It's always weird to hear it all over again. But thanks, Maggie and Brian. Happy to be here. Thank you.
I want to start this podcast by saying you're such a badass and we're so lucky to have you on today. Just listening to your bio, I'm just like, man, where do we even unfold during this podcast, you know? And for this podcast, for you guys listening, we want to cover Shannon's life, everything that she's done up to this point and what keeps her going. So we'll hop into the very beginning, Shannon. Where were you born?
Yeah, happy to.
Like?
Thank you. Yeah, it's like I said, I feel old now. It's like all this stuff has happened.
You're not old at all.
But yeah, happy to share.
Yeah, let's start with your upbringing. Where were you born, and what was your upbringing like?
Okay. So as you know, I live in Bangkok, Thailand now, but I was born in a little town called Portland, Oregon, way long time ago. My dad, I'm Thai. So my mom and dad, who is an engineer and nurse, had gone there to complete their studies. There were jobs available at that time. Then we moved down to California. So Cupertino, in California when I was 2, and basically just stayed in the Bay Area. So we made our home in Fremont, California. And I was living there. I remember the Bay Area. So Milpitas, San Jose. Anyway, so it was.
I'm sorry to date you, but can you tell us what year this was?
Oh my God.
I'm so sorry. It was just really curious because the Bay has changed so much in the last 15 years.
It has. Because I went before COVID. I went 10 years ago and it changed. So I left the Bay in 1990.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. People are listening. Are they, wait, that was when I was born. Oh, wait.
No, not at all.
You have so much wisdom. I can't wait to hear more.
Yeah. So, so was there, went to San Jose Mission, St. Joseph's Catholic School. And we grew up there, loved it. Then my dad decided one day, so we, as a Thai, every Sunday we go to the Thai temple to learn and try to become Thai. So we practice Thai dancing, or we try to learn Thai. It was really difficult because nobody spoke Thai. And so one Sunday, the then Prime Minister of Thailand went to that temple and basically got onto this whole entire thing called the reverse brain drain project. And what that is he was trying to be like, okay, fellow Thais, come back to Thailand and help, help build Thailand and become this greater thing. So my dad got invigorated and he's like, okay, I'm going to go. So we sold our house, moved back to Thailand. Wow. I didn't have a choice. I was 12. Mm-hmm. I had two other sisters. And so I was 12, 10, and 8. We all moved back. And then I was in Thailand. So we went to an international school. At that time, this is so weird. At that time, I actually thought that Thailand was a land of stilts and people rode to schools on elephants.
That'd be so cool, actually.
I feel like that's how they promote it and market it in like magazines and stuff, you know?
It's terrible. Like I was like the worst Thai, right? Didn't even know anything about my own heritage, even though I had been to Thailand, just to remember. So I came back and it was the city bustling and everything. Started in an international school. And I do remember that even though it was an international school, I had to deal with so many things that one year when I was 12, like one, culture shock. Basically I was in a school, but this school was also half kind of like a language school. So we had a ton of Asians, like Thais, who were older than me. Basically, they wanted to learn English. So if I was 12, there were like 15-year-olds in my class, right? So somehow I got verbally bullied a lot because, I look Thai. I look Thai, right? But I don't act or speak Thai. And so they basically called me, lack of a better word, a fraud. They're really mean words being hurled and really mean things that were done. But at that time, and also I was weird. So at that time, I don't know what happened. I did find a group of another eclectic misfits. And something dawned upon me this one day. I remember I just clicked. It's like, okay, fine. I'm weird. Let's move on. I'm weird. I'm just going to own it. I'm going to be this person, and then everybody else, when I was, so the sixth grade, they all had boobs already. They were all so attractive. The guys that I liked, nobody liked me. I had my glasses. I was reading Babysitter Club books. And it was terrible. It was like the worst year for me. So it was like this puberty thing. Plus I couldn't speak Thai, culture shock, misfits. But then my parents basically were starting to get a divorce at the same time. So a lot of challenges that happened at the same year. Fast forward, got through that year. I think the only reason how I got through that year was that I had no other alternative because I had two other sisters I had to take care of, be the older sister. I think us Asians, we understand that, oh, you're the oldest sister, you have to sacrifice. And so basically I sacrificed my emotions and feelings, right? So I think that's kind of built the foundation for a lot of things I still hold to today. And I think a lot of these struggles, relationship or parental or moving or uprooting your life, at such a young age and moving back and forth, it actually really does build your character. Right. So I guess that's a long-winded way. I moved over, I started school here. Then I ended up starting to have fun at school. So grade 7, grade 8, blah, 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 blah. And then there was this one year, it's so funny. I think I was in 9th grade. It was before the Asian crisis. And I think we were already seeing signs of the economy crashing. So there's this one year we had this influx of American or Australian or British Asians that came into our school. And it was really fun because prior to that, it was predominantly a lot of like Indians or Thais or Filipinos, but basically predominant like Taiwanese, we had Koreans, but they were really from their country, right? But we didn't have that influx of like the Asians or the Westernized kind. So this one year came in and then here came a ton of hip hop. And it was like, so we had, God, I'm dating myself now, but hopefully the people, that's why I asked you who's listening, right? Hopefully can relate here. But we had a ton of like Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg. Like we literally were trying
that's so relatable.
Really?
That's part of my time too.
Really? Okay. So yeah, and we were dressed up in our like hip hop clothing, and then like people were like the brands and all this other stuff. And God, we even had our own East Coast, West Coast in Thailand. It was terrible.
Oh, wow.
Like, that's a whole nother story. Anyway, but back to that. So what happened was there were some things that happened during that year. Of course, in your teens, you go through your first heartbreak and all this other stuff that happened for me. Then I decided to write a business plan to my dad saying that, you know what, it's time that I go back to the States. So I wrote a business plan and had all these reasons. I didn't know it was called a business plan. So basically I went, I got back to the States. I went to Benicia High School, which was another kind of weird culture shock for me as well. At that time I was can I say this? Like, it's actually like, basically I was fresh off the boat. So I got the opposite of that kind of racism when I came back. Right. So it's like, wait, you're not really American. The way you dress, the way you act and all this other stuff. And it was a little tough, but I did find my crew, my crowd and all this other stuff. And it was actually quite fun to a certain point. And then in grade 12, I decided, actually it's two things, and think about serendipity in life. The same guy that broke up with me wanted me back. Oh, wow. And so, yeah, I know this is turning into a love relationship. I'll get into entrepreneurship soon.
No, but that drives a lot too. I feel like relationships and heartbreaks and the people who you build relationships with, friendships, they do mean a lot to your
amazing story.
The foundations. So it's really interesting.
I mean, I don't know. Hopefully people can relate, right? So I tell a lot of people, they always ask, why did you move back to Thailand? You're already in the States. Actually, I was just applying to universities. And had I actually taken the US university route, I would be completely a different person. So at that time, yes, maybe the motivation for me moving back was that guy. It didn't happen. I came back, he had a girlfriend, whatever. But I came back and again, wrote my dad a business plan and basically mapped out that Asia's going to be the thing, where it's at in the next 10, 20 years. And that I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be a big fish in a small pond, basically. And so that really was the true reason of coming back. I mean, I did believe that there was something in Asia. So when people ask me, especially people when they're in the States or abroad, like, why did you move back? Okay, the truth is there was that guy issue, but I really did believe that Asia was going to become, I was already there, so I already saw what it was, right? So I already saw what it was going to be as well. And at that time, China hasn't even become the powerhouse that it was. I moved back in 1996. And then at that time, that was the Asian crisis, but we were starting to see things technological advances from China already. So I was happy I did. And so then I came back to Thailand, got into Thammasat, which is international program. So I did finance, also a big culture shock, but it was actually a nicer culture shock. They're mostly Thai, a lot of international kids as well. But definitely it's not the university college experience you would get in the States. But it was a nice way for me to get grounded of being Thai again, like it was like being in Thai school, but then we spoke English, right? Yeah. So those were some of the best years that I had, in college. So did that for a while, barely graduated. Didn't do so well, but I think that I'm a very social person. So extracurricular activities are really big to me. Actually events, charities, all this other stuff. So I think for me, like one of the big things that I got from, university is actually the network and friends and fundamentals of finance. But frankly, I didn't know any, like when I got my internship at Price Waterhouse, I got it because I had interviewed for a position, again, internship, at the corporate finance and investment banking division. And at that time, they were only accepting people that were masters and above. And so I had gone in, I'd read the papers about some debt restructuring that happened like earlier in the week. And somehow I found out that they were actually looking at a deal similar to that, without naming names. And then I got hired just because we got into this nice conversation. And of course I was an intern, so I photocopied a lot. But from then, and this is the dawn of technology, we got our emails and everything. And yes, this is that long ago. And so because I was the resourceful young one that knew how to use and search things on the internet, I became a valued resource. So they ended up offering me a full-time job, and my English and Thai. So one thing that I thank my dad was being able to learn to read and write Thai at a very young age. I had to get a tutor and stuff. So for me, a lot of my friends, because it was the Asian crisis, right? If they only spoke English, they actually didn't get a job. And if they only spoke Thai, they did get a job, but they actually got a really low salary. So for me to be able to like read and write both English and Thai, granted my Thai is like 7th grader level, but it was good enough to work, in PwC. So I started my career in PwC, and I was there for a while. We actually worked on an e-commerce in 2000, and it was just way before its time. And then fast forward, I actually interned in a company which was a subsidiary of Lehman Brothers. And so basically, frankly, this is really idiotic of me, but when I was in finance school, right, when I did my finance undergrad, I didn't know the difference of the different types of finance jobs there were. So financial advisor, all this other stuff, investment banking. So finally got into, did the internship, actually got a job. So worked at the Lehman Brothers office in Bangkok, Thailand, for about 3-4 years, 3.5. And I have to say those were the best fundamental years of my life because, I don't know if you guys watch Sex and the City, maybe. Yeah. But there's like 4 girls, right? So me and my Indian crew, we had one American Indonesian. She was from Tufts. One Thai from Stanford. One myself, right? And then we had a Hong Kong girl from NYU. And so it was the best time. So we just enjoyed our investment banking jobs. I was sent to the Philippines to do some work. At 22, you're like, oh my God, I'm getting this flight. It's like you guys, right? Once you graduate, then people start sending you places. So in Thailand, my first job was to go to the Philippines. So I'm like thinking I'm badass and I have nice little.
You are badass.
Oh my God, I was so cocky. It was terrible. You should have seen.
Every right to be.
Back in our early 20s. And, just pausing here for a bit, congratulations, on that early success and be able to come back to Thailand and refine your identity. I think the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway from your story up until now, it's like the fact that you can readjust really well to both environments just speaks volume to your ability to sort of use your EQ a lot and just adapt. And, as we know, talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, we say EQ is probably more important than IQ in business, and you demonstrate that a lot,
So, I also wanted to just echo what Brian said. I also wanted to touch on that topic as well. You going back and forth from the States to Thailand, that, takes a lot of courage. And, you being born in the States and going to Thailand, going through the identity crisis, and then going back to America and going through another identity crisis. But then it sounded like you were able to learn how to embrace who you were, right? And then as you went back to Thailand to go to school again, you've grown so much, and we could definitely see that, and because you know exactly what to expect now, right? Now that you're going back to Thailand for the second time. So just really wanted to commend you for that, for just like being able to be so mobile and really embracing who you are.
Yeah. We're gonna skip ahead a little bit and talk a little bit more about your experience as CEO of Iconic Media in 2009.
Oh my God. Wow. So you saw that, huh?
What was the transition like working in corporate for 9 years, right? Or more. And finally deciding at one point, you're like, I want to be a business leader. And how different was it during that time period?
Yeah, so that happened after, so I did the banking thing, right? And then I joined a company called Singha Beer, which you guys probably know.
We love beer, by the way.
What?
It's not a promotion, but we love Singha Beer.
Yeah, I do too. You're either like a Singha person or a Chang person, Chang, right? But then if you get the Chang, then you always get Chang overs.
That's a good one. I never heard of that.
It's a Singha joke. It's like the worst joke. Anyway, so did that for a while. But the good thing about Singha was I had gotten my feet wet in terms of events and celebrities. I had to take care of Vijay Singh, some sports celebrities across the world. I had to take care of Miss Universe. And then I remember going down Hollywood, and we were trying to get into put Singha Beer into Geisha House. And then at that time, Paris Hilton and people were, again, so long ago, Paris Hilton and Britney Spears were going to that. Lindsay Lohan was down there. So we were trying to get ourselves into, those kind of clubs and bars and whatever. And so that's where I first understood the power of events, concerts, media, celebrities. So I had a project that didn't go through with Singha. I was very disappointed. And then I realized that, it's never going to be my company. Obviously, it's a family company. And I was never really going to be in control. So I started Iconic Media. I have to say, Iconic Media was not at the least a success for me at all. I mean, in fact, it was a big failure. I had started it trying to get into the TV stations here. I had a lot of access with Korean and Taiwanese dramas and sitcoms at that time. And I thought that I had this thing at that time. I'm always I wanted to get into media education. I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to share things. I wanted to be a voice, or actually be the medium to bring other people's voices and messages to wherever I'm at. And that stems from a lot of, me being in the States, seeing all these things, wanting to bring it to Asia and vice versa. Right. Mm-hmm. So I started Iconic Media with that vision. The successes were, I actually got brought to bring in Asia's Next Top Model. Yes, I know it's not like education, but it was something, right? So I brought in Asia's Next Top Model. I did some game shows, brought some formats in. The downside is I threw a reggae concert.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
It was like 10,000 people, which is a lot in time.
What? That's awesome.
Yeah. And I even brought in Diana King, Big Mountain, and a bunch of these
I love it.
International. I had a Japanese porn star.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So we had that just for kicks as well. And so it was a fun thing to do. Obviously, we made some money. But the downside is I actually wasn't disciplined enough. I didn't have the fundamentals for being an entrepreneur yet. Even though I did banking and finance, being able to run a company, cash flow, understanding how to hire people, it was really difficult. I didn't have the discipline, and my legal work was not on point. So I actually got screwed by some of the TV stations that went circumvented me and went straight to the Korean houses to buy their own content. So long story short, for Iconic, it was my first foray being an entrepreneur. It was fun. But what ultimately killed it was there was one year in Thailand there was floods. And so advertising was first to go. So that completely killed it. We didn't have any more cash flow, and that was done. I did do another project for TV after that. I used some of the experience, but that was under a consulting job that I built. That's in another job. But basically, me and my team got a mandate to build, operate, and transfer over a TV station. This was, what was it, maybe 10 years ago, where Thailand was just moving from SD to HD TV. And so what they did was they refarmed some of the spectrum that they had. We used to only have 10 channels. Now we have 24 or what was it, 30? I forget. We have 50 channels now. Yeah. So they refarmed it. They made it into channels. And so we were hired by one of the big Thai businessmen to do that. So, failure. It was really horrible, actually. And then got to reutilize some of that skill set there. But that's iconic media.
I mean, like you said, right? Startup life is super hard, and most likely your first startup's going to fail. And the fact that you kept going, it never stopped you. You kept moving. As long as you learn from your mistake, and obviously you're so successful now. We look up to you a lot, but I'm pretty sure at the time it was very difficult. And it's like you totally look at yourself in a different light and ask yourself, am I cut out for this? Has there been any time where you look yourself in the mirror and you're just like, dang, maybe I'm not ready for this? And how'd you overcome that and start your next few companies? Moxie was one of them. How'd you overcome that failure and learn from it and continue growing?
Yeah, I could count probably about 3 major times that I really felt lost. And actually during the iconic one, that one was probably the worst in my now 43 years that I felt that I was really rock bottom. I had lost, there are a lot of things that went wrong. It wasn't just business. It was also, I was 28 and a woman, single, just completely single. And when you're 28, Asian, you're getting close to 30 and you're still single, and then you don't really know where that's why the failure was even harder, right? So you don't even have a partner and your career, you don't even know yourself, what you're good at. So that was probably the biggest, and of course there were, vices that you turn to. And I have to say, and then you start hanging out with the wrong people. I'm not saying it's their fault, but you just try to let go and a bunch of things. So a lot of things happened during those 3-4 years. I think the way that I picked myself up from that one, because that could have gone really wrong, was that I think there were some things that I really regret that went wrong. And I woke up one day and I'm like, you know what, Shannon, you can't, this is not the end of your book. I have to say, this is going to sound really bad, but it was pride. Basically, it was just this, I can't go, my tombstone's not gonna be oh, that's the girl that did that, or whatever, right? She didn't even do anything with her life. So I'm like, okay, I need to do it. I mean, I have nothing more to lose. I'm already rock bottom. What am I going to do? So I use this every single time when I go through a crisis, or when I'm lost and confused, is that, okay, I give myself time to cry or whatever it is, be in fetal position, go wallow and whatever. And then drink, whatever people, as long as it's not dangerous. And then I actually pick myself up, and then I take a trip by myself for at least a week or 2. And I grab a journal and I write down a SWOT of myself. And I actually go through my values. I go online and I'm like, okay, what values do I like? What did I not like about what I did before? What am I going? I actually do vision boards or 10-year planning. And then I'm like, okay, where am I on that? So I do all that. And I find out some of the things that I like that's changed and some things that are just not me anymore. So for long story short, for that one, what happened was the upside was I had met my now ex, but boyfriend at that time, the father of my children. And that was one good upside. He gave me some inspiration because I was just dabbling into tech.
Mhm.
I didn't know much about tech at all, frankly. And then when I came back to Bangkok, serendipity, my girlfriend, the Indonesian American, she's best friend in the whole world, Patricia. She was like, "Hey, Shannon, I got this offer. I got this interview. It's a company called Rocket Internet. I have no idea what they do, but it sounds like it's kind of your jam." And then coincidentally, I got a LinkedIn at the same time from Rocket Internet. So I went in not knowing what it was. They were looking for investment bankers and consultants. Basically, Rocket Internet, as you guys know, is a Samwer Brothers across the world, global domination in terms of e-commerce. And I was the second employee at Lazada. So it gave me another wind.
Mhm.
And I think that was probably the biggest change in how I got my first step into tech. I, again, knew nothing about tech. At that time, I was like 31, 32, maybe. Just met my partner, very rocky, because not rocky, but very new, right? So a lot of new things going on, but again, nothing to lose. So just dove into it. And Lazada became such a boot camp for me. It was insane. Like just to understand what tech was, how to build, how to scale, what people look for, he had a playbook, and everybody was just so focused, and it was a tough environment to be in. But what was that, 2012, 11 or 12? That's when the internet or e-commerce boomed in Southeast Asia. And I think that was the ride that I was hoping for, that I had talked about a long time ago. So that definitely, when I was like, okay, now I'm on the right rocket ship. Okay, this is it. All right, let's go. So that's how. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I do have a methodology each time.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, your resilience, you knew that you were rock bottom. And to be honest, some people who are at that rock bottom phase, they never get out of there, but you knew exactly what you needed to do to get out of there. And you instilled those practices. And I did read like an article saying that when you were at Lazada, that really gave you that entrepreneurial push, which is what brought you to create Moxie, right? And like, just like the 180 that's brought you to is just really inspiring.
Yeah, I love that, because a lot of us, as you mentioned earlier, our listeners kind of skip a gap between 24, 37 and then 60, 52 to 61. So a lot of listeners are in that age right now where it's like, they're in their 20s, 30s, early 40s, and they almost feel like nothing's happening for them or nothing's right going for them, right? And it just feels really depressing, really rock bottom-y. I love hearing your story and your perspective, because it's so holistic of your whole life experience, all 42 years that you have, right? And a lot of us right now, when we feel like 28, 29, 30, 31, we're like, oh my God, I'm so old. Like, I can't fail anymore. I got to settle down, get a family, start my kids and whatnot. But guess what? Life still moves on, man. Life still moves on. So I really love it, because it's a story of resilience and continue pushing and innovating, because your next company, which I can't wait to dive deep into more, it's like Moxie, right? I know Maggie mentioned earlier Moxie. This is a company that kind of puts you on the map, and we read some articles on that, and you sold this company, and this is where you truly flourish, because after selling the company, I don't want to skip too much ahead. After selling the company, you started to think more about empowering other women, minority leaders, other groups. And I love that a lot, because that's so similar to the mission of Asian Hustle Network and what we want to do. So I can't wait for you to just dive deep into this next part of your story with Moxie and tell us more about that.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a ride, so at Lazada, I did this thing called Entrepreneur in Residence, where you just basically move around, do different parts. And so I got to learn a lot of parts of the e-commerce. And I thought, you know what, if they could do it, so could I. I mean, I also didn't have like that much money in the bank, right? That they did, but I didn't think that way at the time, very naive. But yeah, so me and two partners basically started our own company. We raised some money. And at that time, we were trying to be the, lack of a better word, hipper version of Lazada. And for people who don't know, Lazada is the Amazon of Southeast Asia, where they are in 6 countries, Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, Philippines, and Malaysia. And so I was I was the second Thai employee in the Thai office. So I was there, when it was all starting, and grew from, God, how many people? From like 10 people to 300. It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. Again, not by me. It was a great team, right? Like I was like they had a bunch of bankers and consultants. And so I kind of did the same playbook. So me and my partners, who were also investment makers, started Moxie again with that. So we didn't know our unique selling point yet. We weren't really sure what that was. Went through a lot of mistakes, almost ran out of money 3 times. And then at one point, in case there are any entrepreneurs here that are pitching startups, we were just struggling. I think in hindsight, there were 2 things. One, again, back to the cockiness. We thought that, okay, we're bankers. We know how to do this. We don't need to go to any of the startup events. I found out later that, as we know, startup is a complete different animal from SMEs. The way you pitch is different. The way you write things, the way you scale, hire people, the way you, metrics that you look at, the speed, all this other stuff. And so there were other tricks in the playbook. And I was just too cocky to get into that peer system, going to the conferences and whatever. So finally, I woke up we realized, hey, we should go. So we started going, and the community is so great. I mean, startup community, we're so open, we share things, we don't worry about competition as much. And then because it's then a big enough playing field. So I started to make, a little headway. I'm a bit older than the majority of the startup founders at that time. And we were talking a lot about branding. I have to say, the one thing that we did right in the beginning was our branding. We partnered with a lot of celebrities. We did a lot of social media and a lot of charity impact. We had fashion shows. It was actually really cool. So, and so we got some kind of attention with that. So I was called on stage to moderate my first panel. And I think that was actually the pinnacle or the turning point of how people started noticing us, because I was on stage with a bunch of like big wigs in e-commerce. So there was a CEO of Zalora, who was the fashion one of Lazada, right? And then there was like 2, 3 other big e-commerce that a friend of mine, Kaidi, which is like OLX classifieds. And so with that panel, a lot of VCs, instead of me chasing them to look at my deck, they actually wanted to know who I was. And so for people who are pitching out there, one of the tricks is not to do the push, but more the pull factor, right? Yeah. And so I remember, just another pro tip, just since we're here. I remember that one day I was listening to the panels, other people were talking, and Kylie, who is 500 startups in Malaysia, around here, he was doing this amazing talk. He's like Dave McClure, like just amazing talk and everything. And everybody is like flocking to, give him their business card. And I tried to give him my business card, and I'm like, oh, we do like an e-commerce. He totally didn't look at me, put his business card in his pocket, just completely didn't look at me. And then that night we had, I forget what happened, but we had a lockdown, not COVID related, but it was like military related or something in Bangkok, and nobody could go out. So I asked a friend, luckily, who had a private nightclub. So we opened a nightclub. And so Kylie was like, oh my God, I heard you did this. What's your name? I need to know what you do. and he had no idea that that was me earlier. Anyway, so it's a funny story because it's the whole entire so the theory of that is if people like you as a person, they'll actually want to know what you actually do. So if there are any aspiring people are there pitching here, try to do the pull factor, not the push factor. Anyway.
I agree. That's very effective. Yeah, we always try to, as we raise money for Asian Hustle Network, we realize that, it's better for people to ask more about us and create more value to the world, and what you did was a classic example of creating value for someone's life, and they want to know more about you. Just be authentic, There's a lot of times where you approach people and that person thinks, this person just asked me again. Why is everyone such a taker? And you change the mentality to be giving value. That's how you gain your leverage.
But you guys are giving back so much. I'm sure that you guys interview a bunch of people out there that, not only do you showcase and amplify them, but I'm sure that there's a lot of people that support your cause. I'm sure there would be a lot of people that would invest.
That's the whole.
Yeah. Well, give me your deck. I'll look at it.
Right,
see what's up. No, but when you have a cause behind it, it actually goes a longer way. Back in the day when I was trying to pitch with a cause, people didn't believe in it so much. They were like, what are you, a charity? I think nowadays, this is 10 years later, right? I think you're in a good position because a lot of the millennials who are at the level that they could afford, even the older people, the 40s, the 50s of today, I think that, you said yourself, there's a bunch of 50 to 60-year-olds that are listening to your podcast, this show, right? And I'm sure the reason why they listen to is because, they want to get updated. They're very proud of their heritage. They want to see this go further. And I'm sure if there's anybody out there listening right now, that they would be interested investors in your company, right?
Definitely. That is the goal.
Yeah, that definitely is the goal. So we have so much to unpack, but I feel like an hour has passed by so fast, almost an hour, but I do want to talk about Gobi Partners. So I did read an article saying that in October of 2018, you represented Gobi and in a pledge to invest 50 million USD dollars in businesses established by women. And so we know that a lot of what you do is to support, women leaders and women-owned businesses. I want to know from you personally, what is the driving factor? And, what brings you to want to support women leaders? And if there is any gender inequality in Southeast Asia.
Before we get there, shout out. Love that.
Yeah.
We're all about that. And, this is where we super align because we create a lot of programs to support Asian women entrepreneurs out there and minority leaders. And the fact you've been doing this before us, set a blueprint that we didn't know about too. You've been doing this for a lot longer than us.
Yeah.
So we want to hear a lot more about this. We absolutely love it. And shout out to you.
Yeah, shout out to you. I feel like just recently they're now talking about it in the US at least that less than 3% of venture capital funding goes to women-led companies, at least in the US that I know of. But you've been doing this, when you started Gobi Partners. So I want to hear from you what your personal experience is like and, what drives you to want to support women-led companies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think getting into woman empowerment. In fact, before I never even used the word empowerment, I felt that it alienated men. But I think that maybe I was just dancing on eggshells. I was tiptoeing around the fact. And it actually comes from it actually comes deeply rooted from my personal family issues. Mm-hmm. Like my mom, single mom, she came back to Thailand, right? She had to quit her great job as being a nurse. She was an office manager here, making $1,000 a month. My dad, who has reformed today, but he was just, Asia, we cheat. Thailand is on some list of being the number one cheaters in the world. And I feel that a lot of things growing up, I did not see a lot of equality at all. Like my the sacrifices that women had to make, the things that we had to kowtow and do, like a lot of, and I do talk to a bunch of my friends. So again, growing up, whether it be high school, all the way to college, I get a lot of women talking to me about relationship issues, what their family expects of them, what they can or cannot do, the ceiling that they're trying to break, not even getting sexual education, having to even talk and think and have an abortion. Just a lot of resources are not available for women. And I feel that, and I remember a woman boss at Lehman once, she actually, rather than try to encourage people to grow, really was catty and just did not want other women to grow. So,
oh, wow.
Long story short, I think it just stemmed from a lot of issues that I saw of women around me and girls around me, that in Asia, and again, there's one more thing, which is in Asia, there's a culture of hostess bars, and the man goes in the Gulf, and then, a bunch of these things. And it's just not fair, So what I wanted to do was, of course, things are never fair in the world, but what I wanted to do was find other alternatives and paths for people to be like, hey, okay, well, this happened, it's shit, right? But there's this too, like here's other things you could do, or here's a resource you can go to, or here's what this person did and whatever. So all of that stuff went into when I was at Moxie, it was kind of two things. I already had this empowerment side of me, but I found out with my then first M&A partner that 75% of my target market of the e-commerce were women. And the rest of them were actually LGBTQ. So we had a bunch of, and of course in Thailand, we have a ton of LGBTQ. Yeah. And so with that minority and I just wanted to empower more. So I got to mix business with pleasure for the first time. And that was the first time. So Moxie at that time was with women e-commerce. Right. And I remember when I was fundraising now, so that was all the issues, right? Then I remember that, during that time, it was really hard for me to raise money. I was actually pregnant, of course, unplanned pregnancy, and I was fundraising, and it was twins. And so I remember the investors were looking at me, and they're like, "How are you going to raise kids and have a company as well?"
Oh my goodness!
And yeah, so that's kind of maybe the first inkling of how I got about the business sense of what women needed. Right. So fast forward, that's how when I joined Gobi, so Gobi's been around for this year's 20 years now, also by a Taiwanese American. His name's Tom Sao. And his partner is Kuke Mok from Singapore, went to Berkeley. Anyway, so a bunch of Asian Americans or Asian Westernized in Gobi. And I was fortunate to join them. And one of the great things about the management was they really brought in, so actually they invested into Moxie. That's how I know Gobi. Oh, and they were one of the ones that were like, okay, well, yeah, you have kids, but so, I think you're resilient. I think you can multitask. I think you could do this. You definitely know your woman product. I believe in the business and you and your team. So fast forward when I joined Gobi, I had met during that whole entire years of being in the woman scene. I went to Singapore, met with Pocket Sun from SoGal. I met with Crib. I met with Google. There's SheVC. I met with, She Loves Tech, Virginia Tan Lian, Rovers from China and from Singapore. I was in Japan meeting with this other woman group. They have issues there in Japan. And then, so everywhere around the world and all these women that just came together. So I have to say, like, the thing that you're hearing about now, it comes from a lot of these groups kind of getting on the bandwagon about 5-7 years ago. And everybody started doing like, you know what? Hey, it's not about alienating men. It's about providing tools and resources to women. And because, like you said, 3% of total VC in the States was to women. I know for a fact, and a bunch of other women founders for a fact, that it was hard to do it. And we have we just need another path, right? And so just level or give another, up on the game for people. And I think the latest update of the same stat that you have this year, it's 1.2% of total VC.
Yeah, I think in 2020 it went down to like 2.3. So I'm not surprised that it actually went even lower.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah. And it's also, just your story about how, because you were pregnant, they didn't think that you could run a business and raise your kids at the same time. But it's like, why can't we, And I'm so glad that you were able to meet someone who actually, believed in you, because we're totally capable of doing that. And it's disheartening to see, women who are pregnant or who have kids, they have to go through that experience because they know that is the perception that, a lot of investors have, male investors.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
One group that I don't know if you've interviewed them yet. I do know that Shelley Porges is on your LinkedIn, but there's a group called the $Billion Fund. I think now they're called Beyond the Billion, but Sarah Chen and Shelley are going across the world. So they were the ones that put that initiative together that you're talking about. So to raise $1 billion and talk to funds like us to pledge X amount to look for women founders, but also even if we say no, we have to help critique and help them grow, because a lot of times, and maybe if you go through my articles that you see, I talk a lot about cognitive biases. So sometimes an investor would just say no to a woman or a man, just to say, right? Just because of something they said or a peer or, that doesn't fit the stereotype. And so what they are trying to do is they make the investor accountable. Here are the concrete ways and why I said no. So it's not just, gut feel and all this other stuff. And so, and if it is, at least you can address it. So this group I work a lot with Sarah. So that's how we pledged $50 million. And I think as of last year, I think we hit the target already of $50 million deployed throughout China, Hong Kong, Southeast Asia, all the way to Pakistan.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
That's so amazing. And yeah, I'm just so inspirational just to hear more and more about this, and knowing that over in Asia, because I think one of our weaknesses on this podcast that we don't have enough representation in Southeast Asia on the podcast, and the fact that we're listening right now and hearing all the great work and progress that you guys are doing, it's very touching for us to hear. And I'm glad we had an opportunity to really talk about this issue, because it is something that we as Asians, we understand that is deeply rooted in Asian culture. This is so real.
Yeah. And it's still around. And even I think the biggest issue here is that people are not aware. There are a lot of women in C-suites, but they don't always have decision-making power, which is where it counts.
Yeah. And, you're still a Gobi, we see that, but you're also became CEO twice of 2 other companies afterwards.
Wow.
And that's absolutely amazing. And we love to see that you're continuously grinding. You're breaking against all norms, you're breaking against all odds, and you're continuously grinding. Like, what is being CEO for you like now? And what is your day-to-day like? Because I can imagine you're overwhelmingly busy, and I actually have no idea how old your kids are. So it's like on that task too, it's like, how do you manage everything and take care of yourself?
It's, I have to say this new CEO position is definitely the most challenging job I have had ever. So you heard the story. I've been in e-commerce and banking, all this other stuff, but this time around I am in 5G, and I'm definitely not a techie, right? I'm not from engineering. I'm from finance. I'm a business person. The team that my co-founder is actually the tech guy. He's like the telco guy. But we saw an opportunity last year and and we took it. And I knew I wanted to do it differently. But we're up against, I mean, basically with 5G, what we're doing is we're trying to utilize 5G to power smart cities. And I know it's a whole buzzword now, but I really believe, me and my team really believes that with the power of knowledge and data, like we can actually use this to have more transparency, to be, to bring safety to our citizens. I don't know if you know what's going on in Thailand, but we've been under this government, which really, I don't want to touch upon it, but there are questions about how it was elected and whatnot. So, just having the power of transparency, being able to decentralize data at citizens' fingertips, like that's something, and being able to provide something, that's really something that's still really deeply seated with us. And how we're going to do it, the politics that we're up against, and we have major competitors, it's tough. So to answer your question, like what does CEO mean? I mean, frankly, when it's still a small startup, we have 10 people. We have partnerships with other companies which we're allowed to utilize their other hundreds of people, which is good. So we try to be the satellite, and then we utilize people in different partnerships. But it's tough. Like it's having to make the tough decisions. So not only do you have vision, but vision's just, goes so far unless you have to pivot. Mm-hmm. So we're in the middle of pivoting. We have cash flow. We have understanding our competitors, trying to make sure we're stealth and being able to do things the way, keeping our unfair advantage, and just trying to go for it. So it's a lot. Luckily, I have to say, yes, COVID slowed things down, but we were able to launch Thailand's first 5G smart city in March this year. So
congratulations.
Yeah, it's huge. Like it's huge for me. And so, it was a nice challenge to get over, but it's just the beginning. Now we just woke up the monsters. Now everybody's like, oh my God, I want to do it. So I'm like, oh, so yeah, but that was really tough. And now we're in COVID. So we have lockdown again, which is actually delaying a lot of things, but everybody's dealing with it. Mm-hmm. The upside about COVID is I do have more time with my kids. So I have 2 girls, so they're twins. Their father's Norwegian. And yeah, they're 7 now and I see them every day. And so it's been really great to be able to work at home. You might have heard in the background, people walking down like, guys, I'm doing a podcast low. They don't understand that, but So
it's okay. They're 7.
They're 7. Yeah. But yeah, the upside is, I think the way I manage things is at home. I'm fortunate to live in Thailand where I am able to hire a nanny. So she's my co-parent. Like she runs this house. She gets the groceries. She cooks, kids, drop off the kids at school, pick up the kids, And so I'm so fortunate to have that because as mentioned, I'm a single mom too, right? So and I have my sister living with me, and she's a teacher. So she's been able to help, but you can't do it alone. Right. So I'm fortunate for that. And COVID has brought us even closer, which is great. So a lot of challenges, but that's how I do it. You got to manage the household, you got to manage your work, make the hard decisions and keep going. Right. I mean, now
Absolutely.
Now the biggest thing is I can't fail. If I find myself in a dark place, I cannot fail because of the kids. If not, the kids won't have anyone. So for me, that's another driver for me. I mean, yes, I want to save the world, help Thailand, but it's for my kids.
Yeah. That's your why. I love that. So what's next for you, Shannon? Like, what are your goals for the next year? It could be
the rest of 2021 at least. How do you want to finish strong? And this question can be anything. It doesn't have to be strictly business.
Yeah, it can be personal as well.
You're extremely fit. the first time I talked to you, you were literally in the middle of a yoga session.
Oh, wow.
You're doing planks or something and talking to me. I'm like, wow.
Planks and talking? Oh my goodness. I can't do that.
So what's next year for the year? And what is your primary focus? And how do you want to close out 2021?
I'm trying. I've always been a very extroverted person, and COVID's been really good about focusing my priorities. So this year and last, I have been very focused on kids, making sure I have quality time. I feel that with COVID, I don't even know when they join second grade if they're going to be able to read at that level. So, Tiger Mom comes in, right? Or Dolphin Mom, whatever. Okay, so the kids, work's the biggest thing. Aside from kids, but I need to crack this even better. I know the potential. We're ahead now. I have to keep that, going. And if there's anybody listening here who's in anything IoT or smart cities, please call me. But yeah, so I definitely want to make sure that this year ends well for next year, because it's going to be rough. So, and this is exactly the tipping point that we need, because now that we're coming out of COVID, supposedly, there's much more emphasis on automation and all the stuff that I'm doing in health and citizens and all this stuff. So if I can't do it right now, Shannon, you have a problem. So work is a big thing. Health is also such a big thing. Actually, yoga, I just picked it up in March last year or April last year. I was a gymnast when I was younger, which is why I'm flexible, but I didn't have the discipline. And so actually for anybody who hasn't taken up yoga, I've tried it for 20 years. I always did it wrong, which is why it didn't work. Now it actually focuses me every day. If I wake up and I have these wandering thoughts, stupid thoughts or angry thoughts, it actually calms me down. So, focuses, and then you feel like a warrior, warrior princess. So you feel like it was good for me to have that health, component come in, because I've been really unhealthy for 20 years. So those are the kind of the big parts. I think for me, just getting back with really close friends across the world, my family as well. Love isn't really on the cards yet. But yeah, I'm very happy with the quality time I'm having with my kids and being able to grow this. And I think you could only have 3-4 real interests a year. If not, you can't do, I don't know. I used to say you could have it all, but somebody else coined this and I believe her more. It's you can have it all, but not all of them at the same time. So, so yeah, I've been fortunate to be able to have, different things at different times. And I think that's also helps with the resilience, right? Okay, this one sucks right now. All right, fine. But this one's good. So then we'll wait for that thing to be good. And then that thing to, anyway. So yeah, so that's,
yeah, I love that.
And we do believe you can have it all.
Mm-hmm.
So we just love that a lot. And that mentality of never settling for less.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. So we do have one final question for you, Shannon. And that question is, what advice do you have for an aspiring entrepreneur looking to get started? Something that you would tell yourself when you first started?
So I say this a lot, and I always go back to it. I guess you already heard my story. I'm not the smartest person, but you basically read the room, read the world, find out where the opportunities are. If you guys haven't read Blue Ocean Strategy, please read it. But I think one of the biggest thing that has helped me, at least, in my life, is find out what's your unique selling point, what you're good at, what you can actually, and the way I do this, because it's very hard to find out what you're good at, because it's hard to analyze yourself, but it's a lot of trials and errors, and don't try for a year or 2 years. You got to try. One of the biggest thing about learning what you're good at is also what you're bad at. Right. So, a lot of things that So when I do this analysis where what I'm good at or I'm bad at, like I said, the SWOT, right? I also do an analysis of the competitor set of what they're missing, but I really go down to the finite, right? And so with that, then I can start to see patterns and white spaces of where, and then you go into yourself, right? Your values and your strengths and all this other stuff and your network, what you have, your assets and, soft skills, hard skills. And then you build that and then you're going to find this nice little space that you actually have an unfair competitive advantage. Hopefully it has a good, bigger market size, right? Because you can't be too niche or unless you really dive deep and you are niche, who knows? But I think the biggest advice that I could give anybody is you have to dig deep and really find out what that unique thing is. And it will change, through the years. I think for me, it took me 3 big iterations in my life, each time 3-4 years to really find some things I'm good at. I'm still working on it. I'm still trying to find it, but you slowly come up with that, like, it's not just MVP, but you slowly polish it more, right? As you go. And I think that's just, it will help you go a long way, especially for those who, weren't the honor student in your class or whatnot, but that does help. So if those who are listening and are still studying, that doesn't mean you should not do good in school. I'm just saying for the people who didn't do good in school, So I think that's my parting words or advice.
Awesome. Thank you for that. My biggest takeaway from that statement is like, everyone's born with unique skills, strengths, and weaknesses. So being able to identify and go with your strength. I think so often in society is that we get so much negativity because they're like, oh, working your weakness, working this, working that. But what if we change our mindset to really focus on our strength? Exactly what you did, Your strength is being social, being high EQ, and it goes a long way because it actually builds confidence as you continue on your path. So really appreciate that advice a lot, Shannon. And Shannon, how can our listeners find out more about you and reach out to you online?
Sure. I haven't been very active this year in terms of talks and everything, but very happy to be on Asian Hustle. But yeah, so I have a Facebook page. And it's the page, not the personal one, because the personal one, And so find me on Facebook, and for the young ones, find me on IG. I think my IG, as you saw, Brian, it's much more life rather than like, if you like the business stuff, then it's like, that's my LinkedIn. So Shannon Kalayanamitr LinkedIn. Yeah. And then that's also the Facebook page. But then if you want the fun stuff, the thing is you're going to see pictures of my kids, yoga, bikinis, my work, me talking and traveling. So, I mean, that's really it. So of my IG, I don't know if that's really inspiring.
We're very interested. So we'll also include all the show notes, guys. So don't worry about it. You don't have to Google search it. Just go to the website and we got you.
Yeah, we'll include all of that in the show notes so that you can learn more about Shannon's life and her kids and yoga and everything else. Shannon, it was awesome having you on the show today. It was so amazing just learning about your story. Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. I really appreciate this a lot. And I know you're super busy. So thank you for setting aside an hour and what is it? 15, 20 minutes to be in the podcast. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Maggie and Brian.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the show.
We would like to get to the top 10 on iTunes, so be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We release an episode every single Wednesday, so stay tuned.
Thank you guys so much.